call to order the meeting of the Fire Code Board of Appeals. Can we get a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Beckman?
Here.
Miller?
Here.
And Brookline?
Here.
And Junior.
He's here too. So just a quick reminder, this is on telephone, so for waiving the duration of the meeting. Can we get approval of agenda? Any additions or deletions?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed? All right, can we get approval of the minutes for the meeting dated September 19th, 2018?
We approve the minutes of the September 19th meeting as presented.
Support? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the September 19th meeting, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed? All right. Next, move into public comment on agenda items only. So this would be the time for the applicant to, I assume you want to do that?
Yes.
I'd known I was going right away, I would have just left it plugged in. I didn't have to wake up again. Looks like we're getting there. Okay. All right. And again, I appreciate the Board of Appeals' time and the opportunity to address it again. With that is an appreciation for you guys taking this seriously, and certainly the applicants appreciates that. All I want to do tonight is not re-argue what we talked about last time, but just touch on the new information that we provided, and do that really just walking through the findings that we're asking you to make, so that there's no confusion as to what that is. The first is the first finding that we submitted to you, and I don't know if you have this in your materials. If you wanted to find it, I'll have them up on the board here. So, but the first finding is this, that you, the Board of Appeals, find that Build SB cannot be forced to extend municipal water service to the property. In the fire chief's review, he requires Build SB to revise its plans to include water main detail. This is in all three of the official reviews that we have submitted to us. The fire chief doesn't have the authority to impose such a requirement on Build SB. Under certain circumstances, the township board can require a developer to do so, and we talked about that section. That section, however, does not apply because Build SB is not a developer. But even if it did, that section gives the township board the authority to do so, not the fire chief. So that's the first finding we're asking you to make. Now, in this process, we get it, and last time an attorney for Chief Janik and the fire district came up and said, that first one, that's not really an issue, we're not requiring that. Kind of a concession that, yeah, we're not, and we can't require you to extend the main. But here's what we're dealing with. That's still in the official report that we have. So we need this board to do something about that. We can't just take a comment off the cuff of, well, that's not, we're not really going to enforce that. That's still part of the review. So maybe you want to add something afterwards acknowledging this. During this appeal, the fire chief and his attorneys have indicated a willingness to abandon this requirement. Perhaps that's how you address it if you so choose. The second finding relates to NFP 1142. So we ask that you find this. We, the Board of Appeals, find that NFP 1142 should be applied to the property. With approximately 134 persons per square mile, Saugatuck Township is a rural area by definition. And there is no municipal water at the property, either within the private easement or where the private easement hits abuts 135th Avenue. This is the property, this blue square, okay? The blue line is where the water main is. I didn't put in all the water mains, but the relevant ones are there, okay? You can see there is not water service at the property, period. Now, there's been comments about North Shore's property. Well, the water main goes across North Shore's property. Let me be very clear on this because the chief seems to be conflating them together. North Shore is not the same as Build SB. They are separate entities, there is not any overlap in ownership between the two. They are completely different companies, completely owned by different people, okay? So this is the property in blue. Build SB doesn't own part in the red that's owned by North Shore. The other property owned by North Shore, or any of the other property that its neighbors own, okay? You can't say the neighbor owns property, therefore you need to extend the water main. So there shouldn't be any dispute on this part of this finding as well. So this takes us, I guess, to the heart of the matter from our perspective. Finding number 3, which relates to water flow. And I think there's just 2 simple questions trying to dumb it down here, to simplify it. What is sufficient water flow for the property? And secondly, can that be achieved with the existing equipment and infrastructure? Now, as to that first question, what is sufficient water flow? We've looked at NFP 1142, and it says 1,000 gallons per minute. And we know that Chief Janik wants us to tie into the 8-inch water main on 65th Street. Here's the letter that he just recently sent to you on the 11th. And here's what it says, I quote, "This existing 8-inch water main is good enough for Hidden Dunes. There is no reason this water main cannot be considered for Mr. Bosgraff's commercial development." So, really the idea is that we're going to tie into that water main. So it would be relevant to know what the gallons per minute for that hydrant are right on 65th Avenue. And this is from the study that was done that shows that it has 1,062 gallons per minute coming out of that hydrant on 65th. So if we do what the fire chief would like us to do, which would be to extend the water main down 135th from this 8-inch water main and then up the private road, we could have no more than 1,062 gallons per minute. By making the main longer, you're not going to increase the gallons per minute in the main. It's going to be that. And that is sufficient. So the NFPA and Chief Janik aren't that far apart, 1,000 gallons per minute and 1,062 gallons per minute. But as you know, we've given you the materials from a nationally recognized expert, Paul Shapiro, who specializes in fire flow technologies. He's recognized around the country.
And I think we have read all those materials.
Sure.
And we're at 6 minutes.
Okay, all right. I will wrap it up very quickly. So here is what can be done, is running a hose from this hydrant. And at that, with that simple setup, you can get 1,250 gallons per minute with equipment and hose that are sitting downstairs here. Not with any mutual aid agreements or anything like that. Now, if they decide for some reason they want more, and even one pumper truck shows up from one of the other companies around here, they can get over 2,300 gallons per minute. That's more than sufficient water using existing equipment and existing infrastructure. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brent Banoff, captain of the Sauktik Fire Department and Sauktik Township resident. I just want to comment on that water supply operations study. Mr. Shapiro, respect the man very much. He knows what he's talking about. The only thing that is missing from the study is the practical application that goes with that and the environment that goes along with that. You know, a lot of the math and things like that actually work. That's absolutely fine. But I don't think what's applied there is our availability of resources are, I think, kind of different from maybe what he's discussing in his report. Our resources are limited on manpower and on apparatus. You're not going to have every firefighter here inside of 5 minutes with every piece of equipment. You know, it's just not the way we're able to operate here or throughout the county or throughout the state. You know, we could really extend, you know, it might take 15 to 20 minutes for some of the later pieces of apparatus and people to get there. There's some significant traffic control issues that with this intersection that we would have to block off to utilize the Blue Star hydrant. You know, we're talking about effectively a 6-way intersection with 12 different directions, and then securing almost 2,000 feet of roadway to secure this water supply. And the manpower and apparatus needed to secure that from people running it over, you know, issues happening. And I've watched people run over our hose lines so many times. I've been in the court for people running over our hose lines. You know, and to guard this resource is difficult. You know, we could be upwards of 8 people, 8 to 10 different vehicles, police, signage, and extend that out to rerouting people. It's significant. And if we're dealing with an emergency, that's going to be that much more difficult. You know, it's hard to put out the fire and, you know, protect, you know, a few thousand feet of roadway. I think, you know, obviously laying both of these hose lines is going to significantly inhibit our access once they're laid. You know, we have really big trucks. You take up most of the roadway with these hose lays, and they're not easy to move once they're full of water. Once they're full, they're in place. Yeah, I think another thing that hasn't really come into play here, you know, is weather conditions. I mean, what is that roadway going to be like when there's 2 feet of snow out there, and there are snowbanks this high along both sides of the road? You know, significant challenges for us to overcome, and the whole purpose of these things are to get, you know, all we're really asking for is not so much, I guess, that the amount of water, but to have it located on site in a 24/7, 365 application. It's always available. It doesn't need to be trucked in. It doesn't need to be brought in with thousands of feet of hose. That's a significant undertaking to lay that much hose for any fire department to do it effectively. And, you know, I do kind of question the 6 to 8 minutes listed in the report. I mean, that is perfect conditions. Nobody on the roadways, nobody fighting with you over blocking their access. And probably one of the things that creates one of the most significant challenges is with the apparatus layout in the report. We're talking about putting two of our 3 pumping apparatus at those hydrants. 2 of 3. With all of our hose, all of our equipment, all of our medical equipment, our AEDs, everything is over a quarter mile away. Back there at the fire hydrant. And essentially, you know, I respect Mr. Bosgraf for, you know, being a businessman, and I wouldn't want to hinder, you know, him being successful. You know, and I would ask that he not, you know, discourage us from being successful in maintaining, or being able to maintain a safe area and be able to effectively mitigate an emergency on that property. You know, I think it's the fire department's responsibility to determine how it is that we get water on the fire, where water supplies should be, and how we need them to effectively do our job. I wouldn't ever consider asking Bill SB to, you know, could you not use nail guns and build this with just hammers? Would you not use a petty bone to put your trusses up and do it by hand? And I think that's what we're being asked to do here, is to do this the hard way, harder than necessary. And, you know, I just ask you to really consider that when making your decision. And I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Is there any other public comment?
It's a tripping hazard right there, you know. Well, good evening. Thanks for allowing me to be here. And this is our first Board of Appeals since I've been on the department since 2001. There's never been a Board of Appeals, so it's something that's significant. Something else I would like you to keep in mind. Reach out to MDOT. This six-way intersection, relative to the water study report, keep in mind, please, that there are 5,800 vehicles per day per MDOT that transit Blue Star Highway on 135th. So to shut that down, you can't underscore the magnitude of what that's like. You've got 245 cars an hour on a 24-hour basis. We know most of the cars are during the day. So please keep that thought in mind. I want to share with you some relevant information that's with fire flow technology. And the following excerpts are from fire flow and fire ground hydraulics. And it's research documents that I feel will be simple to understand. There are formulas that tell us how much water is needed for a specific size building. These are good for books, but not good for practical application. The bottom line is hit the fire with as much water as possible based on your manpower, equipment, and water supply situation with an attempt to overwhelm the fire. If 250 gallons per minute will knock down a fire fairly quickly, 500 gallons per minute will do it even faster. Myth number 2, laying a large diameter hose supply line is like taking the hydrant to the fire or like laying on above the ground water main. Reality is, it is the type of thinking that has gotten LDH users, large diameter hose users, into trouble many times at large flow operations. Think about what the statement is saying. Basically, it tells you that there's nothing that needs to be done in conjunction with the hose evolution. Just lay it, and it will deliver all the water that is available. This could not be further from the truth. Rule number 2, keep it simple. Fighting fire definitely gets high marks as far as degree of difficulty is concerned, both mentally and physically. Let's face it, we're dealing with abnormal situation that we did not create and did not say so, and where it could happen. Therefore, I feel extremely important to make our job as easy to perform as possible. What does this mean when it comes to flowing big water? Take a look. Get rid of the formulas. We've all been taught that formulas for calculating the required fire flow for a structure fire. First of all, who says that one person's approximation of what the dimensions of structures are is going to be the same or even close to what mine or yours is? Second, how sharp are you going to be at your estimation at 2 o'clock in the morning? When you are first in and the whole world is on fire, if, like most of us, things can be a little cloudy, instead, using this formula, why not break the fire flows down into 3 categories: small, medium, and large? I want you to know that these excerpts are from Paul Shapiro, the person who wrote this. And that concludes my comments.
Any other public comments?
All right, my name's Captain Mike Betts. I'm here with Saugatuck Township. I've been in the fire service 25 years, and 7 of which it's probably been here. I don't really have so much, I guess what I really have is a question. It's more of all political issues, personal issues aside, why are we not given the best opportunity to protect lives and property in this community? That's where I'm, you have to forgive me because I'm probably out of the loop on some of this, but that's the biggest question that comes to me. So what I'm asking you folks is to give us the best opportunity to protect lives and property in this community, because that's what our job is. Thanks.
Any other public comments? Okay. Moving then into unfinished business for considering the appeal of Bill FC LLC. I first wanted to start with any questions from the board that they might have. Any questions?
Really.
Okay. Let's move then into discussion. So I wanted to hear from each of you sort of your thoughts based on the materials that we reviewed at the first meeting, the materials we've received since then, the presentation, the discussion tonight. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe Eric.
No, ladies first.
No, go ahead, Eric.
Someone has to.
Okay, I'll go. Well, I want to thank Mr. Boscraft and Mr. Geddes and Chief Janik for the quality of information that was provided to us. I've learned more about the NFPA 1142 and the IFC 507 than I ever cared to want to know about it, seriously. I don't know how you guys do it sometimes. But I want everyone to know that I've taken this appeal pretty serious, very serious. I live in this township. I live 1.5 miles away from the said property. I go on walks by that property. It's a beautiful piece of property. And I am for, we can put it in the paper if you want, quality, safe development in our township. And I believe this project that you guys have proposed will be a great improvement to that area. So I do like what you guys are doing. I am not, excuse me, a tree hugger. I just feel that you've done a nice job. It's going to be very well done, very tactful, and I think it's going to improve that entrance to the area. I met with 2 developers in my due diligence, one residential, one commercial. I wanted to get their opinions. I'm a sandpaper salesman. I can tell you about grit and grinding and everything else, but I'm not a developer and I'm not a firefighter. So I wanted to get their opinions. And I was planning to meet with another fire official, but I ran out of time, and I think I know what his opinion would be, so I kind of know where he's coming from. But I base my judgment and my position on this on talking to those 2 developers that I have a lot of respect for. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm not going to tell you my decision because I think that's part of the action. But I want them to know, I want everyone to know that I didn't sit and get 1,000 emails and not look into this deeper than what it needed to do. So you have my word, I've done plenty of work on this. Okay?
So, this didn't make sense to me. So when something doesn't make sense to me, and I've been on Saugatuck City's Planning Commission, I've been in government for approximately 15 years, and this just didn't make sense to me. That a developer would tell the fire department to do their site plan review but don't review water. That makes no sense to me. So I went to the site, I looked at the site, I walked around, I kicked some stones, I probably could have gotten thrown off from it, so I looked at the site. And I came up with far different answers than, I like how you ask questions and then answer them. I came up with different answers than yours. First of all, there's a big sign on your property. John, can you put that on the board for me? Well, while John's bringing that up, I'll say this. When this development was approved by the Saugatuck Township Planning Commission, it stated, the approval is conditioned on review by the fire district, which must approve a proposed water supply for the development before building permits can be issued. Now, this is from a memo on August 7th from Steve Cushion. And, you know, I guess I don't care who the developer is. I think we move on from that question. And John's not ready yet. And then the second question, these are on September 19th, can the fire chief mandate which type of water supply Build's SV chooses to satisfy the FC? Yes, an alternate water supply can be suggested by the builder to the site plan inspector, but the authority having jurisdiction has the final say. According to the township, the AHG is Fire Chief Greg Janik. Should NFPA 1142 be applied to the property? No, this property is not rural. Please, are you kidding me? This property is on the Blue Star Highway that has almost, I bet you, by then, Greg's MDOT use of the highway was from 2011. It's now 2018. In 2011, it was calculated that 5,400 cars a day drove down the Blue Star Highway. I would suggest by 2018, there's more than 6,000 cars a day that use the Blue Star Highway. So to call, and there are 25 businesses within a 1 mile radius of that property. So that property is commercial. It is also adjoining the Blue Star Corridor. Now, I had the great pleasure of serving on the Tri-Community Planning Committee, which, trust me, was a chore. I listened to Aaron Sheridan from the township expound ad infinitum about the Blue Star Corridor and its development. So that's a commercial development, I'm sorry. It's not a rural development. There's not a horse, a cow, a pig, or a barn out there anywhere. There's 6,000 cars a day. Is this property serviced by municipal water? Yes, it is. And we can go into that a little bit later. This is about property. These are kind of the same questions. I don't think water flow is even coming before this board. That's not our decision, that's Greg's decision. Now, there is a municipal water supply. John, do you have the first?
Technical difficulties.
Okay. There is a municipal water supply located on the Blue Star Highway, as well as an as-built connection on the north side of the highway directly adjacent to the property owned by North Shore Development. This suggests to me that this is a viable water supply. This water supply was used by Hidden Dunes Development Subdivision as a viable water supply. So how can you say it's not a viable water supply? It's even in your presentation as a viable water supply to lay hose from to fight a fire at your development. So I don't know how you can say it's not a viable water supply. The casings that are under the Blue Star Highway already for the 8-inch line that runs under the Blue Star Highway that feeds the water supply at North, or at Hidden Dunes, is an 8-inch water main. The casings are 24 inches. I checked with the person that put them in. So to say you have to bore under the Blue Star Highway and put in casings, that's not true. They're already there. There was a T put on the other side of the Blue Star Highway specifically to run down 135th Street when it was developed. Now, for the life of me, I can't understand why the township wouldn't want their infrastructure extended. That's how you build infrastructure. My friends from Douglas are right now in the middle of a huge infrastructure problem because it wasn't built along with the city. So you need to build your infrastructure as you build out, and that's the developer's responsibility.
Here, Jen, try hanging on to your...
It's all right, never mind.
Okay.
There's a sign on the property that says 17 acres will divide. That tells me You're not gonna kind of develop it, you're going to develop it. So you need to develop the infrastructure along with the property. Just like the gas lines you're laying, you need to lay water supply for a fire department. If you're going to develop, for God's sake, develop, and do it correctly, not, oh, now we have to go back and do this, and we have to do that, and we'll make this plan now. I disagree with the fire chief. I don't think there should be an alternate water supply. I think you should supply the water that's needed in the correct manner the first time through, and save yourself a lot of money. That's what.
Like both of these people, I spent a lot of time thinking about this and reviewing materials and sort of working through different scenarios and looking at it from different perspectives, because it is important to me to take this seriously and to look at it objectively. You know, I don't have any stake in this one way or another, other than as a citizen of the area, it needs to be safe for everybody. So the single question that I think faces this board is whether the fire department misinterpreted code when communicating water supply requirements for Build SC's planned commercial development, which includes 5 buildings with more than 21,000 total square feet. It's not our role to develop solutions to conjecture about the future development, to investigate or compare decisions of the past. We have just for consideration this particular case and the applicable codes that govern that case. So in my mind, the single question of whether code was misinterpreted can then be broken down into 3 more focused questions. Number 1, what codes apply, which is a question that's been a lot of focus of conversation. Number 2, what were the fire code officials' interpretations of those codes? And then 3, were those interpretations acceptable based on what the code actually says? That question of which code applies is critical. And there are 2 potential options, which I've also learned way more about than I wanted to. One is the International Fire Code, which requires a fire hydrant 400 feet or less from the building, or alternative means of supply, or NFPA, which would allow other forms of water supply, such as on-site supplies or relaying. The applicant believes the NFPA applies, while the fire department believes the IFC applies. According to the code, NFPA applies when reliable water supply systems for firefighting do not otherwise exist. However, the line between a water supply existing or not existing is not black and white. There's no numbers-based definition in the code. For example, it doesn't say that a building needs to be 100 feet from a water supply for NFPA to apply, or does it need to be 1,000 feet or 10,000 feet. It's not concretely spelled out in the code what that distance is between existing or not existing. So the question is who makes the determination? And the answer for that is clear, both IFC and NFPA. So IFC B103.3 notes that the fire code official is authorized to utilize NFPA. Not the developer and not the township. It says that the fire code official is the person authorized to utilize NFPA. Looking at NFPA, they're consistent in this as well. So 1142.1.1 notes that the authority having jurisdiction, which is the fire code official, determines whether adequate and reliable water supply systems exist. So not the developer, not the township, the fire code official, according to NFPA, is the person who determines whether NFPA applies or not. So in this situation, the fire code official has determined that a water supply does exist, so IFC does apply, not NFPA. The Board of Appeals could consider whether this is a reasonable determination, and I think there are 3 factors that could go into that. One is, while Saugatuck Township is classified as a rural area, it is not without public water infrastructure. And being a rural area by itself does not require the use of NFPA. 2, there are indeed 2 water mains that are reasonably proximate to the development. One of them, an 8-inch water main on 65th Street, is particularly close. 3, in other ordinances governing development, Saugatuck Township considers 2,700 feet or less to be reasonably proximate to water supply. Both of the available water mains are significantly closer than 2,700 feet, less than half that length. I know this ordinance does not directly apply to this development, because we're talking about not some land division act of 1974, but I believe that determination of 2,700 feet or less is reasonably proximate, can factor into the fire department's determination of whether or not to apply NFPA. And then fourth, on one hand, the developer argues that a water supply doesn't exist. On the other hand, they suggest a solution of a long hose. But I don't think you can hook up a hose to a water supply that doesn't exist. So I agree with the fire department that if a water main is close enough to run hoses to fight a fire, it's close enough to build a hydrant. Based on these factors, I think a determination that IFC applies is reasonable. But let's assume for a moment that NFPA applies rather than IFC. Under NFPA, the fire department still has the authority under Annex G to determine that a municipal type water system is warranted. As G.2 notes, the determination of the need of a municipal type water system is based on anticipation of a large-scale fire situation in a commercial building. With the buildings of this size, which are commercial, I do think anticipation of a large-scale fire is reasonable. The applicant has asserted that the fire department does not have the authority to require extension of water mains. Only the township has the ability to require that under certain circumstances. However, both IFCA and NFPA, which have been adopted by the township, do in fact give authority to the fire department to require municipal water supply. So back to the question on what codes apply. In the end, it doesn't actually matter because under either IFCA or NFPA, the fire department can determine the municipal water supply is required. However, the fire department has consistently stated that IFC applies in the situation, and I see no case for misinterpretation with that assertion. So now for the second question, what were the fire department's interpretations of applicable codes? That's straightforward. Under the assertion that IFC applies to this development, the fire department has stated that the preferred solution is a hydrant within 400 feet of any exterior portion of a non-sprinkler building or 600 feet for a sprinkler building. That clearly adheres to IFC requirements and is a sound interpretation, but is not the only potential solution. The fire department, through multiple in-person and written communications, has offered the opportunity for the appellant to suggest alternative on-site water supplies, but the appellant has not done so. So stepping back from analyzing the code and looking at this through the lens of common sense, for a development of 5 buildings and 20,000 square feet, which is a few hundred feet away from an existing water main, doesn't make sense to require a hydrant, and I think it does pass the common sense test. It's in the best interest of the developer, which should invest to keep this building safe. It's in the best interest of the township to continue developing infrastructure. It's in the best interest of the taxpayers that pay for firefighting personnel and equipment. It's in the best interest of the fire department, which is charged with protecting property, people, and personnel. And finally, it's reasonably feasible to accomplish. So I would move to dismiss this appeal based on these findings and the record presented to the Board of Appeals. So at this point, I'd like to invite a motion from the board.
I got one more thing to say before we vote, because I didn't really, I guess I can tell you what my opinion is and then we can vote. In my opinion, after reviewing the quality information that was presented, doing my due diligence, I believe that the code was correctly interpreted. NFPA 1142 is not applicable because there is a reliable water source less than 650 feet from the entrance of this property. And when I discussed it with the developers that I talked to, they first said, well, how far is it? I said, 650 feet from the corner. They said, we've had to run miles. What's 650 feet? And I think James was going to bring up something that said, we'll divide. I don't know about you, but at some point you're going to sell this stuff. You may want to have water in front of it to have a quality development that'll be easier to sell. So that's how I came up with my conclusion. Maybe he did a fabulous job, did a lot of research. I did more of the talking to developers that have gone through this. They've done large local properties, local developments, and they almost laughed at me when I said it was less than 650 feet. And I wheeled it out there. I was walking with my wheel from that corner where there's, on the north side of Blue Star, 135th, right? North side. to the entrance of your property. Well, that doesn't solve going back, but maybe there's something we can, you know, you would be probably, I'm not gonna speak for you, but there's a hydrant at the entrance. To me, it seems like it's feasible to, better than running hose, so that's how I came up with my decision. So I believe the code was correctly interpreted.
Do you have an official motion? We do have an official motion.
We probably have to have a roll call vote.
Just so we're all clear, my understanding is you stated the, if you will, you outlined the motion and the basis for it, and you're inviting the other, some board member to make the motion and then another to second it.
That's
Okay,
correct.
would you read your motion again, please?
I move to dismiss the appeal based on the findings and the record presented to the Board of Appeals.
I'll move.
And that's, just again, for the record, that's predicated on what you read from your notes earlier.
Right.
That's correct.
Can you say that one more time?
I move to dismiss this appeal based on the findings and the record presented to the Board of Appeals.
Well, before we go any further, the whole point of this was, the check mark was the code correctly interpreted, right?
That's correct.
And I said, no, I'm saying it was, so I guess that's my vote or whatever.
So, discussion on the motion, I have one more thing to say as part of
Okay.
discussion, which is, you know, dismissing the appeal does not get us to a clear solution,
No.
which is not really the official role of the Board of Appeals to develop solutions. But after the vote, if the parties are willing, I think we could have a discussion on what potential options are. And I do have an outline of several that were discussed with the chief last week that seem to be on the table for approval or discussion. So if the parties are willing and able to discuss solutions after we vote, I think we could continue the discussion. Otherwise, if you're not ready to do that now, I think it's between the developer and the fire department to do that later. Any other discussion on the motion?
Well, it's just between us. So,
Yep.
no?
Were you adding your part about whether the code was interpreted or not to the motion correctly? I didn't, or I could read back what I have so
Well, the
far.
whole question to us is, was the code correctly interpreted? Basically, it's a yes or no.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, Aaron came up and told you why he came to his conclusion. I came up, told you why but the point is, well, it's a yes or no. And my answer is yes, it was interpreted correctly. So that box checked is, you know, I'm saying it was interpreted correctly.
Still mean to dismiss.
No, that's right. I guess the only thing I want to emphasize is, but each of you have had an opportunity to state on the record
Yes.
the reasons why you came to what you did. So, yes, you're voting to either overturn or not the decision of the fire code official, but it's based on what you stated on the record.
Right.
Oh, did you second it? Yeah. Or, because you said you moved, right?
I moved it.
And did anybody?
I'll second.
Okay, that was what I was missing.
Do a roll call vote?
Let me just read this back to make sure I have it all right. Motion by Rick Plank, second by Beckman to dismiss the appeal based on the findings and the records presented to the Board of Appeals. Good, okay. Yeas?
No, we have to do
Oh,
a
yeah.
roll call.
So you made it for Plank,
Yes.
Beckman?
Yes.
And Miller?
Yes. So, I wanted to just, I guess, talk about options. And I'll just lay it out there, and then you guys can, if you want to continue the discussion, we can, otherwise we'll adjourn.
Should that be talked about under public comments? Because that was action of the board, we did an action.
Good action.
So now new business is the discussion of the appeal and maybe public comments, where we have them talk about it. I don't know, does it?
First, I'll share this, and then we'll go into the
Okay.
key thing. So, I met with the chief last week, because I wanted to understand what are the potential options that exist. One is adding a hydrant within 400 feet of the building, the 12-inch water main. That provides the best water supply. If the future development is indeed planned, that certainly seems reasonable.
Can I
Yes.
come on anytime?
Yeah.
please? One of the other discussions that the developers I've talked to said that in the past, they've ran water supply and then had an agreement with the township that as other people in that area hook up, they get the hookup fee to recoup some of the costs. So just, you know, he said it's a general practice, like I said, I'm a salesman, but a general practice that happens all the time. So that would have to, if we move forward, that would have to be done with the township.
Good job telling that.
Yeah. We're all salesmen.
Second option is a hydrant within 400 feet of the building connected to the 8-inch water main. There's an existing T on the north side of Blue Star Highway, correct? Third option is, rather than add a hydrant within 400 feet of the building, the chief has indicated that adding a hydrant at the entrance to the development on 135th Street would be acceptable, at least to support the first phase of development, which would then set up the developer well for future phases. The fourth option is adding on-site water supply of 191,500 gallons. The challenge with that is that, in addition to that being a large supply, if additional development is indeed planned, the water supply will need to be increased for that additional development. So there are a few options there to discuss if we want to. And I think probably doing that in the public comment section. So on the next new business item, discussion of Board of Appeals fee structure, I actually kind of feel we should table that.
I move we table,
Okay.
new business item, discussion of Board of Appeals fee structure until our next meeting.
I support.
Any discussion?
Well, the only thing is that information that I got from the township kind of threw a wrench in what we were thinking. I think Jeff needs to look at who is in charge of the fee structure and who sets the price and everything else. And spend more ink on this thing than care to talk about too. So I guess we probably need to get it to Jeff to see which way we go.
I think gathering more information and then discussing it at the next meeting.
Yeah, somehow the township has decided that they run the Board of Appeals, and actually the Board of Appeals runs through the fire department. So I think we indeed need to get more information, and we can probably handle the fee schedule in a couple of different ways, maybe with a escrow account or whatever. But these appeals are very expensive, so.
Okay, so any other discussion on the motion to table the discussion of the fee structure? Just voice vote. All those in favor of tabling until the next meeting, say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed? Okay, so let's move into public comment. Is there anyone who wants to make a public comment?
Mr. Miller, can I ask you to clarify, I just didn't catch the difference between the first couple. The second one, I had heard you say, extend the water main connected to the 8-inch. I didn't hear the first one, so I'm assuming you were saying connecting to 12-inch.
Yeah. So with number one, connect to 12-inch, number two, connect to 8-inch. Three is, rather than, basically add the hydrant at the entrance of the development on the 135th and whatever that new street name is.
So is it fair to summarize those as extend a water main or dig a pond? And simply where the hydrant goes is one of the options.
Yeah.
But dig a pond is not a permanent solution.
Well, it depends on if they develop further.
I can't believe they would kind of develop it. Yeah.
Can I, and I guess I'm directing this to the chief. Chief, I assume, though, I mean, those are four options. There may be other options as well. For example, there could be a reservoir.
Correct, above ground tank or underground tanks that aren't open like a pond.
So there may be other
Yes,
options
other
as well.
fixed systems, correct.
Okay.
Any other public comment? Okay, any Board of Appeal member comments? All right. Adjournment, how do we do that? Do we have to go?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.